I warmly welcome you to the latest edition of the Women's Voices webinar series, Empowered to Rise. It is a great pleasure to co-moderate this online space rooted in the power of dialogue and dedicated to advancing SDG 5 through interfaith, intergenerational, and intersectional collaboration. I am especially honored to share this moment with Jessica Roland. Jessica and I are both joining you today in our capacity as newly appointed co-chairs of the Gender Working Group of the Multi-Faith Advisory Council to the UN Interagency Task Force on Religion and Sustainable Development. As we step into this co-chairmanship role, we are guided by the shared vision to ensure that the voices, leadership, and lived realities of women and girls, especially in faith-based and community-rooted spaces, are not only heard, but are placed at the very heart of global development agendas, multi-faith collaboration, and peace-building efforts. And it is precisely this purpose that brings us together today. This webinar and the stories we will hear throughout are reminders of why this work matters. Today, in a year marked by reflection and renewal, we gather here at a critical turning point, just weeks after the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. As we commemorate the 30 years since the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, the 25th anniversary of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and the 15th anniversary of UN Women, we are called to both honor past progress, learn from experiences, and confront persistent gaps. Despite decades of global commitments, the crises of our time, ranging from conflict and displacement to climate change, are only deepening inequalities and fueling a troubling backlash against women's rights. Women and girls, many of whom are with us today, often carry the heaviest burdens as frontline peace builders, mothers, mentors, activists, and faith leaders. Yet, they continue to rise. Your resilience inspires us all, and your stories are the reason we are gathered here. At this year's CSW, UN Women issued a clear and urgent message. It is time to move from commitment to implementation. To accelerate that shift, they identified 6+1 key actions, the Beijing 30 plus agenda, which represents a modern lens to guide us forward on peace and security, leadership, sustainable economic development, ending violence, closing the digital gap, and climate justice for all women and girls. And critically, centering youth in all these efforts, because when young women rise, entire communities rise with them. What the world needs now is not more pledges, but rather sustained collective action. We need safe and inclusive spaces for dialogue where faith-based organizations, civil society, and multilateral actors can listen, challenge, and co-create. And that's exactly what Women's Voices webinar series exists to support. Since its launch in 2022, this series has evolved from a space for storytelling into a platform for global advocacy. Through this platform, we have accelerated impact, inspired action, and co-created policy recommendations grounded in grassroots experiences, interfaith dialogue, and regional realities. Today, we gather with a bold question. How can faith-based organizations and women leaders transform values into tangible change? To help explore this, today we are proud to spotlight the work of KAICIID's field experts and dialogue practitioners who are graduates of the KAICIID International Fellows and the C4 Dialogue programs, our flagship capacity building initiatives designed to empower women in interreligious dialogue and peace building. Allow me
Distinguished speakers, esteemed participants, dear friends, I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's webinar in the framework of KAICIID's Women's Voices series. It's an honor to convene such a diverse group of stakeholders from across the globe to follow this timely discussion on women's leadership across generations. This webinar aims to build on the outcomes of the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, CSW, and contribute to the global discussion as we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Beijing process. Reflecting on this year's CSW, it secured a political declaration to move the agenda forward, an effort chaired by KAICIID's founding council of parties member state, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as chair. In parallel to formal proceedings, the side events organized in collaboration with multi-faith platforms marked the election of KAICIID along with the Network for Religious and Traditional Peacemakers as co-chairs of the Gender Working Group of the Multi-Faith Advisory Council, MFAC, to the United Nations Interagency Task Force on Religion and Sustainable Development, which aims to bridge the gap and assist United Nations to understand the impact of religion and religious beliefs on UN pillars, particularly SDGs. Today, we have the newly elected representatives of the Gender Working Group as moderators of this webinar, and I would add they stand as a true examples of young women leading change. Ladies and gentlemen, despite these milestones, we were also confronted by persistent disparities. Echoing the United Nations Secretary General at the Commission's opening, we are witnessing a growing pushback on SDGs 5, structural barriers and violence that deny millions of women and girls their fundamental rights. The blueprint set out in Beijing nearly 30 years ago remains unfinished. If current trends continue, up to 158 million more women and girls could be pushed into extreme poverty by 2050. And yet, failing to invest in education and training for young people, especially girls, affects economic growth, as according to the Gender Snapshot 2024 costs the world over $10 trillion annually. Reversing this trend calls for turning today's complex challenges into opportunities. This moment invites us all to reimagine how we lead, how we serve, how we partner across generations, traditions, and sectors. Sustainable peace and inclusive development are not possible unless women and girls can participate equally, lead meaningfully, and live safely and freely. That is why KAICIID places transformative tools such as interreligious and intercultural dialogue at the heart of its work across its programs in Asia, Africa, the Arab region, Europe, and in view of expanding to Latin America. Across all these regions, KAICIID is working to bridge divides, create spaces for dialogue, and build capacity through encouraging and promoting participation of both women and men in peace building, conflict prevention initiatives, and policy work. Our experience at KAICIID shows that when faith leaders and institutions work together, they can be some of the most powerful advocates for inclusive and peaceful societies. By bringing together leaders, women, youth, and community actors, the Center is building dialogue platforms that challenge exclusion and ensure that women are not the exception, but the norm in shaping more peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. Dear friends, as I conclude, I would like once again to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speakers and moderators, including the young women leaders among us today, representing diverse local and regional contexts, for being exemplary role models. The wisdom of experience meets the innovation of youth, forming the foundation of intergenerational collaboration. Together, your voices are vital to shaping a better future. I encourage each of you to listen actively, share your inspiring stories and experiences, challenge your assumptions, and most importantly, build new connections that will empower and inspire us all. I'm confident that our collective objective of achieving genuine leadership and intergenerational dialogue will make today's discussion a meaningful and impactful one. I thank you again for joining us and for your kind attention. Have a good day ahead. Thank you.
My name is Melina. I'm from Mexico and I'm representing right now Latin America. I would like to share with you an overview what is happening in interfaith action for gender equality in Latin America. If you know, Latin America is a region with 20 countries that not only we speak Spanish, there is countries who speak Portuguese, French, and different indigenous language. So talking about Latin America is talking about a deeper faith, diversity, culture, and a lot of love. But also, in another view, we have different problems that in a different regions there exist, right? So one of them, and I would like to share, and this is beautiful and understanding what is happening. So 90% of the population in Latin America identifying themselves with a religion or a spirituality path. Most of them is Christianity, but there is a different, and there is like a small minority with different religions. And this is very beautiful, and to understand what is happening, this is one of the opportunities and challenge in the leadership of women, because 70% of the women are actively involved in the religions community. So the women are the group that sustain the religions community. What that means? That means the women are the group of people to celebrate the festival, to read in the church, to organize the community, that also are part of the creating spaces for women. And this is in cities and rural areas. So, but what that means, if there is 70% of women involved in religions community, they don't have a space to also leadership. So, however, only 50% hold a formal leadership position in traditional religions institution. This is a picture that you know what happened in this week, and I'm so sorry for the loss for the Pope. But this is the gathering to represent the interreligious faith in Latin America. And that you can see, there is only men. So that's very interesting what is happening. But because if you can see right now in the streets in Latin America, the women are the groups that is organizing gatherings to be together, to understand what is happening and all these activities. In another part of view, in a different daily life that what is happening, we have one of like 70% for 70% of the women, we experiment physical or sexual abuse. And this is also because there is legitimized and malinterpretation for holy books. And according also in a different in work and dignity part, the men always there have a better job. They have and the women's we are in the group of we have only we are in informal jobs, in care work, and unpaid work. So, but there is a beautiful opportunities with that, because now the women we are gathering together and we are forcing to create groups for alternative religions movement. We are integrate different spiritualities. We are recognizing our roots, and we are creating interfaith networks with a strong presence in digital and community spaces. Still, we are in a community base, but the beautiful part in that is we are trained and and with different levels. For example, we are creating spaces with art, with circles, with speaking with each other. And I will show you a little bit one imagine that inspired me a lot and what that means interfaith and faith-based religions gathering in Latin America. This is how we look. We look with power, with resilience. We look with different position in different leadership. We are trying to be in different spaces in this moment. I will stop to share a little bit the screen of, I would like maybe to see this imagine that you can imagine our region. But there is happening beautiful things with this movement because Latin American women are the women to supporting resilience for the Mother Earth. They are gathering together, they are supporting in different interfaith movements to stop the reforestation, to stop to how deforestate the forest in the Amazonia in Brazil, in Mexico, Bolivia, Peru, that is very strong the pluralism. They are creating spaces to reread the holy books to stop the patriarchal ideas with our bodies and our role in the society. So we are creating different spaces and creating different workshops and structure for understanding more about what that means to be a woman in this society with our own identities and different ideas about our dignity in jobs, for example. Also, we are creating different educational financial workshops to understand how we can empower financially and the churches and faith organization and they are creating spaces for holding educational programs for women and to finish education, to not stay only in community base, also to continue in different positions. To finish the conversation is empowering women in faith communities is not only about inclusion, it's about the transformation together and interfaith collaboration, that we can create spiritual spaces that bring the flourishing of women in all Latin America.
Thank you to Melina. When she was speaking, I could relate to a lot of the issues she raised coming from a context that shares almost the same values, especially for religion. My presentation is basically going to focus on empowering young people. This is an area that I've most engaged because I have lived the experience. To share first my own example, using myself and also going further to look at some of the work we've done in terms of empowering young voices. My name is Lantan Abdullahi, you can see, and I always love this picture because it shows us my story from where I'm coming from to where I've, come this far. Like a lot of you or some of you know, I grew up in a very rural community, very, very rural, where when I was in primary school, before I finished primary school, 40% of my school friends, the girls, were married off. And before I could finish high school, another 60% may have been married off. So I am among like the 10% of girls who had the opportunity during my time to actually advance beyond high school. So looking at this picture is a reminder, and I always share it in my community, local community, village, WhatsApp platform to tell them about the value that if women or young girls are empowered, they can attain, greater heights. So my fate was actually resigned to housekeeping, childbearing, taking care of the home. So this story of resilience is always an inspiration, not just for me, but for a lot of the young girls that I've worked with. So basically, I'm going straight to the context of Nigeria, where everything is stacked against women and girls. And I'll share some basic statistics of what exists currently in the country. So this is an award I received from the FCDO, from Her Royal Majesty Queen Elizabeth, as recognizing Commonwealth champions, called Point of Light Award. In Nigeria, women constitute half of the population. So just like we had, from Latin America, we have 90% of the population believing in faith of one religion or the other. For Nigeria, you are either a Muslim or a Christian, and that constitutes like 90% of the population. But when we come to women and girls, Nigeria constitutes, we make up 50% of the population. However, that does not translate to much. Because when we look at the statistics, we have only less than 5% of women in elective, positions in a country with a population of 200 million people. So, for example, in our National Assembly, the highest parliamentary organ is the Senate. We have just 4 women out of 109. So that gives you an idea of where we are headed. Nigeria ranks 130 out of 146 in the Global Gender Gap Index. So according to the World Economic Forum, imagine 130 out of 146. We have seen a lot of deaths. A lot of you that follow our stories, from Boko Haram to the farmer herders conflict to kidnapping and armed banditry. A lot of the challenges that we've seen, from succession of, one group to the other, out of the country, and so many. So we've, recorded thousands, almost 20,000 related deaths to this conflict, and more than 26 million people have been displaced or are actually facing acute, food security challenges. We have a very young population. Nigeria and indeed Africa have one of the youngest population on earth. Our population, young people's population, is more than 50%, which is supposed to be a good, indicator of how we can be able to take that as an opportunity to build. But that hasn't done much. Out of our displaced population, 79% of every displaced population are actually women. 1 in 3, and I saw that in Latin America, has experienced physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. And remember, we have the lowest rate of reported cases of physical or sexual violence because of the culture of silence. So we are underreporting these issues, and I'm sure if we are reporting, we'll have more than 1 in 3 women experiencing violence in their lifetime. Of course, Nigeria is also has the highest rates of maternal deaths at 10%, 512 for every 100,000 live births for maternal mortality, 10 million children out of school. So there's just a lot. But in terms of the work we do, we have realized that advocacy is one of our greatest tools to actually be able to advance our voices and also amplify our issues and our causes. And if you look at the 4th slide, you will see that we have done a lot of advocacy work. I think I started more with advocacy. I remember during the days of Bring Back Our Girls, or for victims of violence, you'll see a picture of me holding justice for victims. I think this particular case was actually of a young girl who was trafficked to a family for, domestic work. And the father will rape the girl, the son will rape the girl until she died. So the mother, or the supposed mother who was supposed to be in charge of her, actually knew this was going on and never provided support for the girl until it was at the critical stage when she was rushed to the hospital. And that was when it was discovered how she has been abused over a long period of time, and she lost her life. So we actually engage on some of these. And there is one also about a national campaign on ending GBV. We do a lot of other campaigns about social reforms, gender equality, especially around national action plans or affirmative action, and so many other these things. So these are examples of the work we do. But most importantly, we also recognize the importance of intergenerational mentorship and leadership. A lot of the time, we know that when we were growing up, we came to this space, we didn't have a lot of mentors. because the space was not yet developed as it is today. So we didn't have any blueprint, we didn't have any help. We were just doing trial and go, learning and making mistakes and relearning, and that was how we were able to build our skills today. But we did recognize that we cannot do it the way we have also, we agree on the space, and that's part of the things we do. And include, apart from just looking at young children, we deal with, young women and so many others. This is an example of some of the work we do with children in school. For example, for coming from a conservative Muslim society, I've recognized that a lot of the time, there's a lot of, interpretation of what is the role of a woman or a young girl. And so a lot of the time, a young girl in the Muslim conservative society grows up to think that her role basically ends up in the home. So we champion this kind of events and activities to actually encourage them to be who they want to be, and also maintaining their dignity in their religious spaces. So for example, this is an example of a World Hijab Day event that we actually organize in our, among our friends, in our communities. It's a global event, but we also do it in our little, in our corners, in our communities. One is saying, I want to be an engineer. And we are saying, yes, you can be an engineer covered and still aspire to be who you want to be. One says she wants to be a doctor. One says she wants to be a teacher. So these are kind of events we organize to actually encourage leadership in young people, especially those coming from conservative communities. We also do a lot of mentoring with UN Women, for example, and other organizations, targeting young people in communities who have been victims of violence or whether violent conflict or sexual and gender-based violence. We have girls' brigades in churches that we also go there to mentor, to actually give them the opportunity to explore, the kind of life or aspirations or, ideas they want to be. We also have in many communities, on countless number of communities, women organizing themselves into groups, because we know to be able to challenge our current situation, we must organize ourselves. The woman agenda must be unified and united for a purpose. And that's how we've been doing it. Having women groups, whether for economic purpose, whether for political purpose, whether for social reforms in communities, but the agenda is the same, that women's issues must be at the forefront. We also have girls' clubs, or leadership clubs, in schools or in out of schools within the communities. I think the other strategy we do, and this is in collaboration with KAICIID, one of the amazing transformation I've seen in 2020, we were on a project. It was just a commemoration of the International Day for Victims of Violence Based on Belief. And we said, let's commemorate and find out what is happening in this space. And we went around to identify camps, internally displaced persons camps. And we came across one. We went to many, but this one actually left some emotions in all of us who were there. When we went there, they came all the way from the Northeast to Abuja, because they kept running and running and running until they found a space in Abuja they could sleep, and a lot of them you can see, they were born in the camp. Some came when they were babies, but they had never attended school. The girl speaking actually changed the story in that particular camp. We went there, we asked, the parents were talking, but we said, we want to hear from the children. What do you want? And this girl said, I have never been to a school. I want to experience what life is in the school. And we all cried that day. And I'm happy to report the second picture. It is that dream that this girl had that led to the establishment of a school within that camp. We started with less than 70 pupils. Today, we have more than 420 pupils in 4 years, thanks to the support from KAICIID and also the collaboration with the Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace in Nigeria. So this is one story I always love to share. But we also feel as women and as also as young women, like I keep saying, we need to be united and unified in our agenda. And networking and collaboration has always been key. Even within the Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace, within our women's spaces, We collaborate, we bring women together across all ages, from the young to the old, not just to share intergenerational, experience, but also to learn together, to work together in the achievement of our common purpose. So within the IDFP that KAICIID supports in Nigeria, we ensure there's nothing less than 30% representation for women in the leadership position. It is still not a good number, but coming from a context like Nigeria, I would say we are making progress. We are not where we want to be, but I think if in terms of religious spaces, I think that's where women feel the brunt the most, because these are spaces that still does not recognize the participation of women. So it is still a very good struggle, and to achieve 13% within IDFP, for me, I think we are doing well. We also have a specific gender and women committee within the IDFP to help mainstream gender into all components of IDFP. So that is also helping. But basically, we have also recognized and leveraged on the importance of networking, whether with national organizations, with regional organizations, with international organizations. For example, in my introduction, you will hear that I am known for being a mediator, a trained mediator, and also a facilitator. And one of the things we've done is we realized we cannot do it alone. So we formed, I'm part of the founders of the National Women Mediators in Nigeria. We are part of the steering committee for the one in West Africa hosted by the ECOWAS. We are part of the Commonwealth Women Mediators Network. We have a Global Alliance of Women Mediators Network. These are networks that help us to leverage on, opportunities to bring home to our women and to advance, our causes. And I think one of the things we do in terms of empowering young voices, including for women, is the fact that we always like to emphasize that we cannot do it alone. So leveraging male champions and harnessing interfaith action is a critical component of our work. Like we say, Nigeria is a country of faith. So we believe you are either a Christian or you are a Muslim, because the 10% don't even matter when we talk about issues of interfaith in the country. So leveraging and harnessing those potentials are critical, because they will help us to respond to patriarchal structures. There's a lot of cultural beliefs and norms that impede into our religious values. And sometimes there's a very thin line that you cannot be able to separate, between the two, especially in the Muslimdom, where a lot of cultural norms have been taken to mean our religious, norms. So it is critical that we are leveraging these people, whether in terms of showing a united front, because once we show that Muslims and Christians are living in peace, it helps. In a country that faces one of the most devastating religious strife, presenting our male religious champions as people working in solidarity with each other, as living in peace, has really helped us to build a sense of trust, and also to create opportunities for dialogue and so many other things. So this work we are doing, especially with KAICIID, supporting the creation itself of the Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace, has really created this important space. KAICIID helped to create the first independent interfaith community. We have other interfaith networks in Nigeria, but we always want to be proud to say this is an independent group that has no government backing, no government support, and thus no government influence to be able to direct it to where it wants it to go. So this is very independent, and we've created this space. You can see the other video is also leveraging these male champions for important campaigns, whether for climate change, whether for food security, whether for violent conflict, whether for addressing and responding to sexual and gender-based violence. They have really become very, very critical to making sure that we influence change by, using their voices. IDFP, the Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace, is a 120 strong member organization. But beyond just the IDFP, they have gone further to look at states. Nigeria is made up of 36 states, and they recognize 10 most important states that face the most violent conflict and establish structures within those states called the interfaith dialogue networks, so that they can serve as first responders, not just in terms of rapid response or security measures, but there are conflicts in Nigeria that religious leaders can help to address, to respond to, and be able to provide quick action to resolve any disputes. I always say change also comes in terms of creating a conducive environment for everyone to thrive, especially for young people. If you look at the slide, we are not lacking policies in Nigeria. We don't lack policies, but I think our greatest challenge has always been enforcement or implementation. However, I still feel we are lacking in these particular spaces. We don't have a national affirmative action. We don't have a national policy on hate speech, and we don't have a national platform for interfaith or religious policies. So something like a national religious harmony commission that was first touted, but nothing has come out of it. So a lot of our interfaith or religious engagement are done informally. We don't have a national structure that says this is a national organization for religious or interfaith engagement.
I'm honored to introduce our book, Dialogue for Women Agency, that I have co-authored with Sohini Jana. So how this emerged as a shared commitment, but a dream that was taken by Sohini. And when we met on a global platform for a conference, we met each other there for the first time, being a KAICIID fellow, though we are fellow Indians, but we met there as KAICIID fellows. So this is how the strong network has been built up by the KAICIID. And there she chose me to part of this beautiful journey. And our commitment to explore women voices in spaces where they have long been sidelined, as my earlier speakers have already shared that, particularly within faith traditions. So as you see the title of our presentation, it is about reconstruction of the perspectives. So this book is just not a collection of stories, it's a call to reframe the way we see women of faith, not as passive inheritors of traditions, but as active interpreters, reformers, and of course, leaders. So it challenges dominant narratives by putting women's lived experiences and their spiritual agency at the core of our conversations about justice and leadership. Why this conversation matters? Why now? As we all know that SDG 5 demands inclusive leadership across all domains, including the spiritual and religious. As women of faith have always led through service, resistance, healing, and dialogue, our book tries to capture their stories to disrupt narrow definitions of what it means to be a faith actor. And I think these narratives are not just anecdotal, but they are transformational. Now, moving to women as a faith actor, I believe that she's not defined by clerical robes or institutional appointments. She may be a caregiver, an academic, an artist, a healer, but her leadership is visible in rituals, classrooms, homes, and protests that we see around. It is not the title that makes her a faith actor, but it is her action rooted in belief and service that defines her. Now, the stories we have taken in this book, we have taken we have tried to reclaim stories that history often neglects. Like Mata Kiwi from Sikh tradition, she initiated Langar as a gender inclusive and egalitarian faith-based dialogue over food, serving food equally to everyone without bias. She introduced this as a radical act of egalitarian faith. Then we have Jahara Begum from Islamic tradition, a princess, a Mughal princess, and a Sufi thinker. Then we have Sister Nivedita, who was an Irish origin British disciple, an advocate of Swami Vivekananda's vision, who bridged East and Western service ideas. We also have Nandini Angami. She's a Christian leader pioneering the cause of motherhood politics in peacemaking in conflict-ridden Nagaland. As looking at these women from the history, we have also taken up the narratives from like more than 50% of young women who are currently working in these areas. Like we have tried to redefine faith and the leadership that is happening today. So as we have seen that women continues this legacy in the form of Sadhvi Bhagwati Saraswati ji, who has been director of KAICIID, and Dr. Farida Khanum, Priyadarshini Sen, Komal JP Singh, and many more who are defining religious authority, climate activism, interfaith journalism, and ritual practice. They don't just follow faith, they just shape it. And in doing so, they offer new models of inclusive leadership. And as I told you in the beginning of my presentation, that this book was a Sohini's dream, where I have been honored to walk with her. And as we continue, I now hand over to Sohini, who will take us deeper into how these stories move from narrative to strategy and from witness to transformation. So over to you, Sohini. So thank you so much from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Kanchan. Now, before I move any further, I just want to say that I'm honored today to be here where we are discussing the role of young women. Trust me, in many parts of the world, it's not easy working in the field of religion as a young woman. So I have firsthand experienced that, and I acknowledge the fact that this book was once an idea that came to life because as a young woman, I was looking for examples of role models, of people around me trying to understand where I feature, how can people like me step into this field and contribute. So this book, being an idea, was only made possible because of the generous support of KAICIID, obviously the KAICIID's microgrant program, and also because of partnership and mentorship that I've received with senior colleagues like Dr. Kanchan and many others who actively came forward to make this happen. So one of the most important things about this book and why we are discussing this book as the focus of this conversation is because we believe that young women need partners. They need partners. There has to be more stories coming in, stories which also feature more young women who are actively in the journey of making an identity for themselves. And they need not always be defined within a structure. So when we say that many women operate outside of institutional religion, what I mean is that we are everyday professionals working in so many different roles, from journalists and entrepreneurs to activists and academics. We are in the development space. We are developing and honing rituals of active immersion in a sense of self and reinterpreting that every single day when we choose to show up the way we do. So here we also talk about female agency, and we're, for this discussion, limiting it to women who identify as female. So we are looking at how women are coming up and reinterpreting their sense of self, how they show up and relate to the world. And in that, they are already reclaiming power and reclaiming the narrative of leadership and agency. Now, I have a few examples of how institutions can listen and provide a space through these stories. For example, one of our KAICIID fellows, Ganga Nandini, is a young yoga teacher and is also an eco leader who is working through a spiritual alliance that is helping her to very uniquely inspire and bring more more young people into the movement of not just health, but also how health and environmental conservation come together, how it's a holistic and connected healing act. Then we have Grishma, for instance, the story of Grishma. She is Christian and she is a very young global trustee and youth voice in the interfaith governance action that United Religions Initiative is initiating. Then we have Shabina Ali, and I'm very happy to say that she is, in fact, attending this webinar. So Shabina is a very powerful community mobilizer who also happens to be a homemaker, and she doesn't distinguish between what her faith leads her to do at home as well as the way she shows up to mobilize community. So in her leadership came from her motherhood experience, which we also explore in this book. Then we have Komal JB Singh, who's an academic. She is from the Sikh community and she beautifully led the disaster relief efforts for the Sikh community, organized by the Sikh community for the Kashmir floods. She is a child of the conflict, hailing from Kashmir, and she's also working on the religious minority identity of Sikhism in Kashmir, which is not talked about as much. So you see, there are so many different ways in which young women and women in general are contributing continuously. It helps for us to not try to box them up when we are talking about them as leaders or faith actors, but to look at their journeys as something that's happening in flow, constantly evolving, adapting, and transforming the narrative. Now, what we could do is to create a space for presence, for women to bring in a sense of genuine presence. And by that, we don't mean just mere representation. Because I know that we often talk about representation, but when we are talking about representation, we're also somewhere also talking about numbers and groups, but we're not talking about the diversity of ways in which women bring their presence, and even if they're not sitting at the table. So are we leading or looking at leadership as just a point where one has to reach, or is it something that's an active journey, that's an everyday movement that we are talking about? And storytelling is something that brings leadership narratives that are flowing constantly. And we have explored, as you know, stories from ancient Indian times till the current day, about 28 stories. So we're looking at it also as something that's evolving over time. So storytelling is not just an act of advocacy here. It's about reclaiming this narrative and redistributing power, about noticing the changes, noticing the very many ways in which we continue to contribute. These stories, through these stories, we have talked about a couple of themes like autonomy within traditions. We have explored priestesses, for instance, who are having a re-look at scriptures and scriptural texts and how they are used in rituals. For example, we have Dr. Nandini Bhaumik. We have rewriting power dynamics. We are looking at, say, Dr. Ruha Shadab, who is an entrepreneur, and she's working on empowering young Muslim women to get top leadership positions because they're underrepresented. Then we have faith-rooted climate action like Grishma and Ganga Nandini, who are constantly working to empower youth and bring more youth into climate action movements while having their voice, while telling them that how the future is ours and we need to work towards it, while focusing on also on health and the narrative which is sustainable overall. Then we have community healing, which is, for example, talking about mental health. Women struggle with mental health issues, have for generations have had to, bear the brunt of being not so expressive because we have to hold everything together. So we also have stories of women like Supriya Hazra, who's working actively to support young women and youth in general to understand that mental health is a very, very important part of this conversation. It is important for reclaiming the sense of self, which will help you to become a leader. than cross-sectoral resilience. For that, I would like to mention that we have, for example, our KAICIID fellow Farah Iman, who is trying to bring in interreligious dialogue into corporate spaces by heading Dialogue 4. That's from Consulis, something that is very relevant today and a very important part of the conversation. And being a leader in doing so, she's also bringing in a gendered lens to support this action. Finally, last but not the least, we believe that these aren't one-offs. They are part of a pattern. Legacy is something that's important. It must be archived, it must be grown, there must be space for evolution and adaptation. Faith-based organizations can be a very big part of this memory making and legacy building exercise. As partners and also as institutions that invite women to create their own sense of leadership agenda, bring in their own approaches, and like I mentioned, go beyond representation to bring in a sense of real presence. That's what we need. And this is just a colorful photograph of all the incredible women who've come together and supported this project. Thank you so much for listening. We really hope that you enjoy reading the stories. Dr. Kanchan, I don't know if you've shared the link where our book is freely available for download. Yes. Let it inspire you to understand and to embody the idea that even if you feel that you're not leading at decision-making tables, every little decision you make is taking you forward. So please don't stop. And allow your sisters, allow your friends and other women, seniors particularly. I cannot emphasize this wouldn't be possible without Dr. Kanchan's guidance, as I am no academic, as you all know. So it's a learning and sharing journey. And that's what makes this effort beautiful.
It's an honor to be with you today and share my experience with She4 Dialogue, a program developed by KAICIID for the Arab region. This program is close to my heart because it focuses on empowering women, religious actors, and civil society leaders through interreligious, intercultural, and peace-building dialogue. In 2022, She4 Dialogue brought together women from across the Arab region, Muslims and Christians, for 3 intensive workshops. The goal was not only to encourage dialogue, but to equip us with the tools to lead initiatives in our own communities, using a gender-sensitive lens to tackle real issues and build inclusive solutions. And so we did. I'd like to highlight several examples of community impact from this program, 1 in Egypt and 4 in Lebanon. In Egypt, an initiative called From Women Comes Peace. It was organized by 4 fellows, 2 Muslims and 2 Christian women preachers, working in partnership with the Egyptian Ministry of Endowments, the Coptic Orthodox Church, and the Coptic Evangelical Organization. They organized a workshop for 28 women religious leaders. The goal was clear: to strengthen women's participation in religious life and to confront critical challenges like gender-based violence, female genital mutilation, and child marriage. Despite coming from different faith traditions, these women shared a unified vision for change. Together, they crafted a set of strategic recommendations aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, focusing on ending discrimination and ensuring full and effective participation for women. Some of their key proposals included creating environments within religious institutions that support women's leadership, providing training in interfaith dialogue, peace building and social cohesion, expanding women's roles in youth spaces such as schools, universities, and community centers, using social media to promote diversity and dialogue, bringing interreligious dialogue to broader audiences, and producing educational materials in collaboration with research institutions. Now, the impact of this initiative has been multi-layered. It brought gender issues like domestic violence into interreligious dialogue spaces. It helped open up faith-based platforms to more women leaders, and it showed that women of faith can act as true agents of change, reaching out to youth, refugees, and marginalized communities. Now let's turn to Lebanon, where 4 initiatives took place, one in Beirut, one in Baalbek, in Tyre, and Mount Lebanon. In Beirut, a workshop focused on women's role in interfaith dialogue. Religious leaders, academics, and civil society actors came together to discuss topics such as women in Islamic Christian dialogue, women's influence in civil society, their status in the church, and their place in interfaith dialogues. I have some pictures I would like to share. Let me see if I can do it quickly with the share screen option. Okay, maybe I can share it at the end. So in Baalbek, there was another powerful workshop addressed the political, social, and legal challenges facing women. Muslim and Christian leaders, civil society members, and educators explored women's rights through both religious and legal lenses, tackling difficult topics like gender discrimination, harmful stereotypes, and domestic violence. In Tyre, Saida or Sur, a youth camp invited participants from different religious backgrounds to explore the city's heritage of Christian-Muslim cohabitation. They engaged directly with religious leaders and asked questions about women's role in religion, youth empowerment, and dialogue. The camp also included a visit to a paper recycling workshop run by local women, an inspiring example of community-driven sustainability. And finally, in Mount Lebanon, youth from Christian, Muslim, and Druze backgrounds joined a 2-day camp where they participated in sessions on emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, and the role of women in both religion and politics. At the end of the camp, they collaborated on a short video reel featuring a poem they wrote together, celebrating the diverse and vital roles women play in society. Now, to conclude, these initiatives shed light on the very issues that the Commission on the Status of Women continues to emphasize: gender equality, women's leadership, sustainable economic development, and inclusive participation. They also highlight the powerful role of interfaith dialogue in building bridges across religious and cultural divides, fostering mutual understanding, and driving community-based solutions rooted in respect, empathy, and shared humanity. This was the initiative in Baalbek. This one was in Beirut, and the one in Mount Lebanon with young participants. And this is where we visited the recycling workshop.
In our group, which is about digital inclusion and decent work for women and girls, we discussed the importance of addressing digital challenges, especially for women in remote areas. Participants highlighted the faith-based organization can play a major role by offering training, raising awareness, and advocating for equitable access to technology. One strong instance was that the local faith leaders can help break taboos around women working in digital spaces.
In Latin America, there is groups that they are working parallel, like together, understanding the new narrative or faith organization, empowering the woman, and also for the human rights to understand. So they are working in the new narrative too, because if you don't work together, that only you are working in certain part. So then you become stronger together, understanding the new narrative of faith organization and empowering of decent work.
for group 2, it was quite an interesting conversation, and these are some of the points that were highlighted. First, capacity, the need for capacity building for communities to understand gender policies that are not implemented, because I think I also recall Lantana saying that there are always policies, but the problem has always been implementation. And the need to train religious leaders on gender responsive social protection, due to there was an example from Greek. There are usually hate speeches against women by religious leaders, because women are hardly seen in that kind of space. So using women against other women is another strategy that is used by these religious leaders. So it is important to create a space where there is knowledge sharing and educating the public on why women roles are important in the society. We also talked about proper parenting, to raise a generation of tolerant, respectful, and educated men who understand the role of women in the society and their importance as leaders, in advancing in advancing peace in the community. Also intergenerational dialogue amongst women to be more active and supportive of one another, because as much as we talk about women inclusion, women leadership, and all of that, and women protection, it's also one of the problem highlighted too is the fact that women sometimes are used against themselves. So there's need to educate women to be more supportive of one another. Now, talking about faith-based organization need to engage more women, like I earlier said, to enforce strategies and positive messaging regarding gender responsive and social protection. And also the use of religion teachings to challenge gender norms and promote social justice by influencing positive attitudes, in the public. This is very important because across all different faiths, there are always positive messaging about, inclusion, about leadership, about peace, tolerance, and unity. Transforming the norms to make policies that create inclusion, also taking example from some of the words of, Lantana, to say that there are always norms, but then how can we transform these norms into, either policies or something positive that can bring, that can translate the lens of cultural norm into women who are taking up leadership roles. Providing needs of women, yes, this is an aspect that has been missing for a very long time, especially in a post-conflict construction scenario. We hardly have livelihood support, healthcare systems, psychosocial support for women affected by violent conflict, and also policies that favors their need for peace and fairness. And finally, also to say that faith-based organizations to collaborate and fundraise, because as much as we have all these ideas, oftentimes implementation by especially local organization continues to be a problem because of lack of funding allocated to this type of initiatives. So faith-based organizations coming together to fundraise, to also show models and best practices on how to collaborate and support community health system, education, and etc. will go a long way for a more sustainable peace.
Train religious leaders and religious educators for gender equality, human rights, and non-discriminatory practice, and refer these principles to their sacred books and scriptures. We also underline the importance of promote inclusive theological interpretations, like FBOs can support religious scholars and leaders who reinterpret sacred texts through gender-inclusive lenses. Also, we consider the influence of the patriarchal system or patriarchal society versus the women's inclusion's effectiveness. And we ask ourselves, how can we read the old text, making space for new voices and new people? We recognize that we need to get out capacity build to be able to serve, be open to engage different levels, learn about institutions and identify areas you can contribute to, and engage decisions makers to see how we can support their work. It's clear that not all leaders can agree to have women in their circle, but get those who support women in work with them. And I just want to finish reading something that is get an activity where you invite the leaders who make decisions as keynote speakers on something you would like them to support, giving scripture backup and slowly change the mindset.
Our group to integrate gender perspective into faith-based organization, I think everyone agrees that this is the end result. But before this to happen, there are a few things that should occur first. So a lot of the people in the room spoke about first understand how climate degradation affects men and women differently. And this is not something known to everyone. And this is something that we need to create a lot of awareness and educational program on this. So that's the first thing. The second thing was mentioned in our group that it's important to come back to faith because within faith there is a lot of morals and values that we share between the different religions. And these could be not only rare opportunities, but good opportunities for all of these faith-based organizations, faith leaders and practitioners to come together to understand how faith and climate is linked to each other and they are not separate. It's not Westerner like a concept. It's part of your own contextually driven faith, but also contextually driven culture. So this is the second point. Also, there has been sharing like this idea that faith leaders are not always represented in these sort of settings when it focuses on climate and environment. And we need to create much more opportunities for them, especially for women. And we need to make the enablers when there are patriarchal societies or the participation of women is limited. So that is the third point. The fourth point is when we're speaking about conflict-driven regions or countries. And before we even continue to speak about climate justice and integrating gender, we need to create locally conflict resolution frameworks or parameters so that we can allow for at least some peace to happen before we can engage in thematic things and we can really understand how this affects, again, men and women differently. The fifth thing, and will complement on everything, it's about capacity building, but also bespoke training for the messengers, for communication to happen. A lot of the people we had in the group spoke about how we can communicate about the role models, doing a lot of initiative that involves women of faith and environmentalists, but also faith leaders, and they are making success. This doesn't see the news most of the time, and we need to be sharing this a lot. And I think Jessica spoke about one last final point. We need to have clear and honest conversation and not tap on each other on how we can engage women perfectly while not competing and doing no harm with other interests of men or patriarchal societies. So I think I'll try to summarize what have been said so far. It's about understanding what is the issue, understanding your context, developing localized, textualized frameworks for integrating women, but also conflict resolution to ensure peace. But finally, communicating about this well and having the final conversation in an honest way.
Working in Latin America, the basis is the community. So it's important to give a space for all the women to go ahead and give us the voice to us in different spaces. That's my next step.
Wherever we find ourselves, know that we are championing the causes of all other women beyond, aside, in front of us, everywhere. So we must be the voice of those who are not on the table or in the room at all times.
We should listen more, learn more, and lead together. And so that faith becomes not a barrier, but a bridge to women's dignity, agency, and justice.
Sustainability, since they're the primary custodians of our heritage and identity.
As part of the gender working group, we have been asked by UN Women to help with a project. And I want to announce it here because as a follow-up, we want to engage you all on it. And that is for everybody that was involved in any year, honestly, of CSW, but particularly this year, it's no secret that these anti-rights groups, let's call them, whether they be member states or civil society, are very, very connected and using the same advocacy strategies, the same messaging and narratives that are pushing back against the gender equality momentum. And so UN Women has asked us to be able to capture that. And as a way, you know, I don't know why it is, but in New York, if you've been there, there is a very big secular and faith divide that exists. And maybe that's because the UN is inherently secular, but unlike the realities of our communities, there is also a divide in the advocacy space, in the gender space, where faith-based initiatives are particularly siloed from the broader movement. So as a way of addressing both of these issues, we are going to use the research that we find and then develop an advocacy brief that will create a narrative that our sectors and allies can utilize as ways of pushing back against these key messaging points that are being used, to whether it's to manipulate scripture or other holy texts. What, you know, we have to use one united voice, and we have to connect with people even outside of our own grouping. So we are going to be looking for positive faith-based examples as ways to push back against these narratives, and just really, really try to solidify that messaging so that we're all really speaking with a united voice in the moment and the timing that we're in. So we would really, really appreciate your help in being able to build momentum from what's created. We're aiming either for the high-level political forum with the SDG 5 focus on gender equality, or before the UN General Assembly, where member states make their commitment. So we'll let you know, we'll keep you updated, but it takes a village, and in this case, a global village, to really push back against what is happening in all of our communities. So looking forward to connecting with you more on that. And otherwise, thank you so much for coming today. I hope everybody felt the solidarity. That's what I needed for my midweek pick-me-up.